Okay, hello again, everyone. I think we've got about 5 minutes before we begin the next session. So if you want to take the opportunity to grab a last drink and get yourself comfortable at your tables, thank you.
case you're wondering, this is the O3 mascot. And they've given me a couple of things they want me to say. So the first one is that they will be sharing with you two tools that have been developed by CII. One of them is an ROI tool that will let you determine the benefits of using AWP. And the second one is an AWP selection tool. And both of those will be available on the conference website. So look for those tomorrow. The second thing is that this may be a slightly different presentation than you're expecting, but the one thing I will say about O3 is they do not lack in creativity, so you'll have fun. The presenters today are going to be two of the chairs, that is Josh Gervin and Andrew Foy, that actually developed the tools that are going to be presented with CII teams. And we also have some rather unusual guests, most of which you've seen before. So you're going to meet Mark Mehta, who presented in one of the breakout rooms, Stuart Young, who presented in one of the breakout sessions as well, and John Fotherby, who's been on the main stage but also presented in one of the breakouts. I can't wait to see your reaction, and I think I'll leave it at that and take the giraffe, and I'm going to go. You have fun.
Hello and welcome to AWP Blind Date. And here is your host, Miss Cilla Black.
Hello and welcome to our show. Today we have a very special edition of Blind Date, where we're looking to find the perfect pilot project for an AWP implementation. We'll meet an AWP champion looking to whittle down his choices with just a few questions. To help figure out which of these three shortlisted projects makes the most sense for our AWP rollout. So first, let's meet our projects. Project number one. So, project number one, tell us who you are and why you are here.
Hello, Cilla. Oops, give me a mic.
Here, just get it, it's fine.
We rehearsed this, you wouldn't believe it, would you? Anyway, hello, Cilla. I'm a new build chemical project in an existing refinery. And I'm here because the last time we did a project like this, it took far too long, it was too expensive, and we now need to build some trust in delivering this project.
Excellent. And join me in welcoming project number two. So, project number two, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you are here today.
Hello, Cilla. I'm a debottlenecking project whose only aim is to make things operate a little more smoothly. I'm here because time is critical for me. Every hour, every day will count, and I need to be delivered on time.
Thank you, project number two. And please join me in welcoming project number three. So, project number three, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Hi, Cilla. I'm a greenfield metering station, and everything flows through me. I'm here to make sure that despite my small size, I still get the attention I deserve.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to all of our projects, and we're delighted to have you join us today. Next up, I want to introduce our AWP champion, who's responsible for choosing the best project for AWP implementation. Please join me in welcoming our AWP champion. So, welcome AWP champion. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, firstly, I'm going to have a seat. Thank you, Scylla. I'm in a bit of a pickle. I'm the AWP champion for our company, and I've been asked to implement AWP throughout our organization. But we've decided to choose to do a pilot project first. So we've done the training, we've got the management team on board, we've got the buy-in, everybody's ready to go, but now we need to pick that pilot project. And I'm here tonight hoping that one of these 3 projects will fit the bill for us.
So I understand you have some questions that you'll use to determine which of these projects will make your ideal AWP blind date.
Absolutely. We've got 4 questions that we're going to go through, and at the end of this, I'm going to know exactly who to choose.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay, question number 1. I like a project with a big budget. How would you show me your value? And let's start with project number 1.
Well, I'm a fan of go big or go home. So my budget is huge. $1 billion. I've got plenty to spend, and I can't wait for you to show me the way to make the biggest bang for my buck.
Wow. Okay, project number 2, how about you?
I like a bit more modesty, but still want to have a good time. I'm looking to spend only about $100 million, but I need my money to go far. I'm looking for an AWP champion that can help me boost my productivity.
Thank you, project 2. Project 3.
Okay, for me, money is very tight, but I still want to have fun and think that with 10 million, we can still have that fun. It won't be a long project, but we can get great results really early and start thinking about the next phase.
Well, that's certainly an interesting start, so what's next?
Question number 2. I like complicated, but not too complicated, especially where stakeholders are concerned. How would you make sure that we had the right number of organizations involved in our project? And this time, let's start with project number 2.
I'm always faithful, and I stick to a winning method. My approach is always single project, single contract. I'm planning a full EPC, meaning I only have one stakeholder to deal with all the way through, and you never have to get jealous that I'm seeing other contractors. This leaves us with more time to collaborate and align on priorities.
Okay, project number 3.
Okay, I'm old school. I like to deal with one engineering and one procurement contractor. Then, to make sure I have certainty on my project, I bid all my site work to the lowest bidder, when I have enough data, that is. Low risk, low stress, and fewer interfaces make me a much more attractive prospect than the other 2.
And let's not forget project number 1.
Well, for me, the more the merrier. I love interfaces. I have different engineers for feed and detailed design. I have multiple procurement contractors and dozens of vendors. And my field scope will be split between multiple site contractors. So my project will never be boring. Late and over budget, but not boring.
Okay, so that's your first 2 questions. 2 more to go.
Okay, now we're getting serious. Everyone has their own way of working, and I've always been a fan of novel contracting strategies. How do you plan to perform construction work, and why? And this time, project number 3, you get to go first.
Okay, I like certainty in my life, and I hate surprises. Only at Christmas I like them. So, I always do my construction on lump sum, small sum contracts. This helps me sleep easy and always deliver on budget. Provided I can steer clear of change orders, that is. We'll be predictable, and we'll knock it for 6, or out of the park, whichever way you look at it.
Project number 1.
I've always thought that a fair day's work deserves a fair day's pay. So when I do a construction, it's reimbursable all the way. I know how to control my costs, and I always walk away ahead. Stick with me, and we'll show the rest how to get a great team together to make a great result.
Okay. And how could we forget project number 2?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit more of a realist. You can't put a price on something as complex as construction, so why bother trying? I always use a unit rate approach, so I get locked in on prices and only have to control my quantities, if you know what I mean.
Certainly getting some good answers. Okay, time for your last question.
Introducing advanced work packaging on a project is always going to require people who can handle change. How receptive will your team be to new ideas and new processes? And we'll go back to number 1.
I'm used to running with big dogs, and so are my project team. These are industry veterans who have seen it and done it all. They might flirt with AWP if they think it will help, but unless you show them a firm hand and keep them in line, they will just revert back to their old methods.
Well, I have to confess I'm more of a cat person, but that's okay. How about you, project number 2?
I always work best when I'm surrounded by a talented team and ambitious people that aren't scared to learn something new as long as we can prove to them that it'll make them look good and be successful. So if you can sell it to them, it'll bowl you over.
And last but by no means least, project number 3.
Okay, my project teams play fast and nimble, which means they are liable to finish the project before you've done training them. You better be prepared to come flying out of the blocks, or you'll never catch us.
Those are your 4 questions. So now you have to choose a project. But before you decide, here's our Graham with a quick reminder of the projects.
So, AWP champion, who will you pick to be your ideal pilot project? Will it be project number 1, who loves to flash the cash and wants everyone to get paid, but might just have too many interfaces to keep you company? Or project number 2, who will make sure they get what they pay for, widget by widget, but seems success is best achieved by handing the reins to someone else and watching them manage everything? Or will it be petite project number 3, who wants pricing certainty and few complications, but isn't sure that it'll be worth your while spending time together? The decision
Is yours, apparently. We missed that last part.
Okay, time to make a decision. Who are you going to pick?
Well, Scylla, there's a few things I'm looking for in a pilot project. I want something that's got some decent complexity so I can truly understand how AWP works for me, but not too complex that makes it unwieldy. I want something that's got a good length to it. I want something that's going to be a project where we can implement and learn lessons quickly so that we can still then roll it out to the rest of our portfolio. And also, I look for a team that's going to be agile and be able to adapt to a new process. So with that in mind, I think we have a clear winner tonight, and I will be picking project number 2.
Oh, yes, I knew it. I knew it. Here it comes, buddy.
Fantastic, and congratulations to project number 2. Unfortunately, that means we have to say goodbye to our other 2 projects. Project number 1, the new build chemical project being created in an existing refinery. And unfortunately, that means we have to say goodbye to project number 3, our delightful greenfield metering station. All right, Andrew, are you nervous?
I am, but I'm excited as well. I'm keen to get this going.
Well, then it's time to meet project number 2, our debottlenecking project. Well, thank you all for joining us, and please come back next week to find out how our AWP Blind Date pilot project went. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Are you tired of your projects running running over schedule and over budget? Are you still doing engineering the way the Egyptians did to build the pyramids? Then you need AWP, the quick and painless way to save all of your manual processes. Side effects may include improved time on tools, less rework, efficient project progress, and many, many more. For more information, visit www.construction-institute.org.
Okay, so first things first, show of hands. Who remembers Blind Date and Cilla Black from the 90s? Because I was really nervous that we were going to get a bunch of blank looks from people saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. So, okay. Good news. You do not need a fake American Cilla Black and a terrible 90s game show to figure out how to pick a pilot project. The CII, the Construction Industry Institute that you've heard about today, has developed a tool to help with this process. What we wanted to do was challenge the idea that AWP could only be done on mega projects, or, on the flip side to that, that AWP had to be done on every single project. There's always questions over where am I going to get value out of this and what's it going to do for me. So we created a tool that's going to assess the details of the project, and it's going to be able to give you a recommendation as to whether there's going to be sufficient benefit to execute AWP on the project. Okay, let's take a look at the tool itself. So the good news is it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's very simple. There's no training involved. We start off with an introduction screen, which just basically tells you, here's what the tool is, here's how it works, gives you a little bit of background. None of this is going to take any sort of complication to figure out or implement. Then we get into the questions. And the way the tool works is it's a series of questions about the various elements of the project. How big is the project? How long is the project? How many people are involved? What sort of contracting style are you using? How's your engineering being done, construction, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're looking for is complexity. We're looking for the things that will tell us that AWP is going to bring value. So on the downside, if you find a very, very small project that's lump sum, single contractor, one skid, not really going to get in anyone's way, you're going to get a very low score. But if you have a bigger, more complex project, you're going to get a higher score. So each question has a series of preset answers. So it's simply a question of multiple choice. So you go through the questions, you pick the answer to each of the categories, and you get a score associated with it. The higher the score, the greater the complexity or intensity of the project, and more likely it is that you're going to need AWP to help you manage the risk profile of the project itself. What we're looking for here is something that can be done early in the project lifecycle. This is something that should be done by the project team, have everybody sit in the room, get the buy-in, can be led by the project manager, project engineer, and we're looking to give them a chance to fill this out in such a way that they can show, here's the information we used to base our decision on whether or not to do AWP. Time frame-wise, it's being filled out right behind me as we go. It's not a long process. It's a fairly simple set of questions that you should be able to answer in a matter of minutes. So this can be an early framing session. And the way we've broken the questions up, there's two groups. The first set of questions aims to address, should we do AWP on the project? Yes, no. Or obviously in the middle, maybe, and we'll get to that. The second set of questions aims to address, okay, if yes, what type of AWP? Not all AWP implementations are created equally. And what we've done is we've leveraged this off something called the Maturity Level Benefits tool, which was also developed by CII and is part of this same suite. And what that does is it lists different categories of AWP implementation. So category A is based on you're not doing it. That's the baseline. That's the traditional no AWP. Category B looks at you're only doing work-phase planning, which is where we see a lot of people starting. Category C, then, you're starting to back it up into engineering. You're doing some of the early work. And category D, full AWP. So what this is looking at is to tailor the recommendation based off your project requirements. There's no learning curve. It's very, very straightforward. And at the end of it, you're going to get a recommendation on those two key topics. So the first one breaks up into three areas. It's either going to tell you, you know what, this project is so simple, quite small, you're not going to worry about it. You may not get value out of doing AWP. Even then, the caveat to that is you can still do certain elements. For example, we use this at a refinery in the US, and whatever the answer was, we also mandated you had to do a path of construction. Because what that did is it got the construction team into the room earlier, got them into the project sooner. So even if we weren't doing full AWP, you're still able to cherry pick certain elements of it. The second part of this is the categorization as to what type of AWP you're doing. And what the tool is going to look for is certain challenges that are going to limit your ability to do full AWP. It's always going to try to recommend for you to do full AWP. So for example, if you list that, one of the questions that's asked for the category is, where are you in the project lifecycle right now? And I've heard a number of times over the years, we're doing AWP on this project, and we're going to construction next week. Well, then I hate to tell you, you're not doing AWP on the project, you're doing work-phase planning. So what the tool is going to tell you is, based on the answers you provided, here's the maximum amount that you can do. So not all of the projects in your portfolio are going to benefit from AWP. So you can use this in two ways. So the example we're doing tonight with this game show is to pick a pilot project, to look at a bunch of different projects and see which one's going to make the most benefit to you. But you can also apply this across a portfolio. So if you've got a portfolio of 20 projects every year, you want a repeatable and auditable process to be able to say why you do or do not do AWP on certain projects. We're trying to get away from that subjectivity of, I'm a project manager, I was at the AWP conference last week, it sounded quite fun, let's do that. Rather, or the other side of the coin is, yeah, one of my friends did AWP on a project and it didn't go great, so we're never going to do it. We want to take away that subjectivity and that opinion and give you a way of saying, here's the standard we're going to use, and the results of this are going to inform whether or not we're going to do AWP. So we're trying to take the guesswork out of the process. We're trying to give you a way to understand how and when to do this and whether or not it's going to be a benefit. And as Lloyd mentioned, this and the other tool that we're going to get to are going to be presented free of charge today as part of the conference. So the question becomes, why did I choose project number 2? If we run the 3 projects that you heard through this tool, there's a very real chance that project 3 would have got a result that said, maybe not. You know, you may or may not get a useful benefit out of this. But projects 1 and 2 would probably both have been told, yes, absolutely, there's enough here, there's enough meat on that bone that AWP is going to be a definite benefit to you. But in this case, what we were aiming to do was choose one project for a pilot and then expand out to the portfolio. So the reason for choosing project 2 in this case was more of a mindset thing than a technical one. I've dealt with a lot of companies who reluctance to adopt is going to be one of the primary killers. If you deal with a project team who doesn't want to do it or a contractor that doesn't want to do it, it's a very, very hard slog. So even within a single organization, if you've got a dozen projects, one of the things to look for is the mentality of the project team, and pick a project team that's going to be agile enough to pick up on this and want to use it. Okay, that's the end of my little speech. Let's see how our blind date went. So this is part 2, where we're a week later and we find out how the date went.
All right. Welcome back, you two. I can't wait to hear how it went. So tell me, was the AWP implementation a success?
Absolutely, Scylla. We had a lot of benefits on the project. Unfortunately, because of the timing, we chose to implement just before construction started, so we were limited to work-phase planning. But that being said, we still saw great gains in productivity, safety, quality, and predictability, so it was a great success.
And how did the project team respond?
We had a bit of a slow start, took some training to get everyone up to speed on what we're trying to do, but once they understood the value and that AWP wasn't going to get them out of a job, they all bought in.
And the key question, did you deliver the project on time?
Absolutely, Scylla, absolutely. We managed to execute slightly under budget and brought the project in a little early, which made a great improvement on our previous projects. It made me and our AWP champion over here look great to the project management team.
So what's next for you two?
Well, we always knew that the project had a planned finish, so I'm not expecting to see the AWP champion much anymore. But now that I'm up and running, I don't need you.
That's right, Scylla. I think it's fair to say I've got everything I need from this project. We learned our lessons, we know what to fix, we've updated our procedures, We've adopted new techniques, and now we're going to start rolling this out to other projects in our organization. I'm sorry to say I'm going to be seeing other projects. The major change that we're going to do going forward is we're going to start looking at implementing AWP earlier in the project lifecycle. That way, we're going to be able to maximize the benefits we get out of it and accelerate our AWP maturity journey. I can't wait to see where we go from here.
Well, excellent. We wish you both the best on your AWP journey. And now, here's another word from our sponsors.
But wait, there's more. If you call now in the next 30 minutes, we also throw in Workface Planning at no extra charge. That's a 20% increase in field productivity value, all included as a part of your AWP prescription. Call now!
Okay. First things first, I realize I am the one thing standing between you and a cocktail, so I'm going to try and keep this relatively brief. The second tool that we're going to look at today is the ROI tool, the return on investment. So it's great to hear that this project had success, but it actually sounded like it came as a little bit of a surprise. It didn't necessarily see that they had the foresight to know what they were getting into with AWP. One of the big challenges we always see, and I'm sure most of us have faced the challenge, is cost when it comes to AWP. The first thing you hear is, what's this going to cost me? I'm going to need workface planners on site. I'm going to need training. I'm going to need software. There's too much cost to this. We don't want a bloated, indirect team on site. Everybody focuses on the cost, and a lot of people will use that as a justification not to do AWP on a project. What they're missing is the flip side of the coin, where you're looking at the benefits associated with it. So to address this, and you're going to see the theme here, CII developed a tool, which will be made available to you today free of charge. What this tool does is it looks at several of the key aspects of the project, such as size and duration, and we're looking at applying industry standard metrics to the tool and proven AWP results to determine the forecasted return on investment. So again, Excel spreadsheet, again, first step of this is introduction, basic background, here's what it is, here's how to use it. And again, no training required, very simple to fill out. In fact, this one is even simpler than the last one that we saw. The first main screen that we're going to look at is the inputs. This is all you have to fill out. 5 items tell us how big the project is, and please excuse the fact that it's a dollar sign. You can put a pound sign or yen or whatever you want in there, it doesn't really matter. Size, duration, category, and type of AWP that you're doing as long as with your maturity. So it can scale based on your expectations. Do not expect to get 10% TIC savings on your first AWP project, please. Then we look at the details of what the costs and what the benefits are going to be. And the strange color coding on this is actually aligned to the colors of the tabs itself. So this breaks down every element of cost that we've auto-calculated and the benefits associated with that. So with just 5 clicks, you've got a result. And you get a graph here that says the blue column is your cost, the green column is your savings, and the orange column is the delta between the two. As long as the orange column is pointing up instead of down, you're good. And this tool is supposed to be as simple as that to use. The next phase of this that we do, though, is we've taken a lot of standard ideas and presented them to you as industry standards. You can configure it. So it has the ability to do user-defined fields. So for example, we say here, direct labor is 40% of your TIC. Maybe you're doing a heavily modularized project, you could be at 20%. I think in this case we say, actually we're going to change it to 35%. So you can put your own values in here and configure it to get a more accurate result based on your project circumstance. The only bit you can't configure is this, and this is the savings. So you saw this morning when Bill O'Brien was presenting RT 272 and 319, and they showed some of the savings and benefits, and this is looking at that just in terms of productivity and cost. So we've scaled that based on the category and the maturity so that you're essentially plotting your position on that curve. Then we go through key positions. So these are the people, these are the construction manager or operations personnel that need to be on the project earlier. That comes at a cost. There's going to be something more money that you need to pay, and we've spelled out here how many people you're going to need and how long they're going to be on for. Same with the workface planners. We take the basic information that you put in, and we've got metrics in there that calculates, based on that information, the size and the duration of time of construction, how many planners you're going to need. And again, if you have better data for some of the key aspects, there's a section in the middle of the screen there where you can put in user-defined values. So you can either accept the base case that we've got or tweak it to your requirements. We also look at training, different types of training. The people on the project who just need to know what AWP is but aren't going to be practitioners, they just get awareness training. Practitioner training for the people who are actually going to be involved. And then we can look at work-face planners who are actually going to be the ones building the packages in the field. And again, we put in some numbers. If you've got better data for the training costs, you can apply it to there. Lastly, on the cost side with the software stack, AWP can be done with a piece of paper and a pen. I do not recommend it. So if you're going to use software for it, you can provide your own details to the software costs. And what that does at the end is it gives you, right back to this screen, you've now configured the return on investment to your own project parameters. And for those eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll probably notice there's two of them there. The one on the right-hand side is if you had selected category D, meaning full AWP. So this assumes you've chosen B or C, which means you can picture this as a tool to plan your journey. What you're saying is, here's what you're going to get on this project, but in future projects, if you go with full AWP implementation, here's what you could have won, to use the sort of game show terminology. And again, this tool's being made available to you free of charge today. The two things go hand in glove. This and the selection criteria tool should not be used independently. They work very well together. And like I mentioned, there's also a third tool in this set called the maturity level benefits, which actually runs through each of these categories and shows you at each category level what you're going to get out of it. It's a more detailed, more wordy document that basically tries to educate people on, if you're just doing work-face planning, here's the things you're going to get. If you then step up to doing the next level, you'll also get these things, and at the top level, you'll also get these things. So what this can do is give you, the first one, the selection criteria, is looking at the details of the project. The second one, unfortunately, until the world changes, we have to always look at cost, and we have to drill into it to understand what's it going to cost me, and what am I going to get back for it. So the two tools that we're showing you today are only some of the great work that is being done by CII to keep AWP at the front of everybody's minds and reinforce it as a best practice. The access to that was provided earlier and can be seen through this graphic on the screen. So CII members can access these tools anytime using the AWP landing page. And if any of you are interested in joining a CII working group, Josh, for example, is currently in charge of one that's looking at AWP for engineering. I'm currently chairing one that's looking at AWP for scaffold and access management. So there's several of these teams that are available, and we are always happy to get new blood, new opinions, new ideas, and new thoughts. Okay, that's it. That's all we have for today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed our slightly quirky delivery methodology. Thank you for those of you who understood what we were talking about when we started talking about a blind date. I would like to say thank you to Scylla/Josh, to our Graham, who conveniently is a gentleman called Graham from Macclesfield. So thank you, Graham, for volunteering to be the voice of doom behind my head. And also our three projects who we roped in to be good sports and help us present this. So that being said, please give them a round of applause. And now we can take questions, which can be done through the Slido app, or if anyone has a question, I'm sure I'll be able to hear you from here.
Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to mention, one of the things that we did within the Performance and Benchmarking Committee at CII was to first say, hey, we need to solve this problem of when you ask someone what does AWP mean, you get different answers, even within the same organization. So the first thing that Andrew and I did within the Performance and Benchmarking Committee was say, hey, we need to put this into some categories. So we defined these categories of traditional project delivery. And in fact, we said not just traditional, but what is good project delivery? What's top of the line non-AWP project delivery look like? Then what is work-face planning of this sort of first level of AWP? And then the second level of AWP is where you're moving upstream in front of that, where you're doing engineering and some upstream activities. And then this last category of sort of full AWP. And the reason we wanted to do that was because one of the challenges we have is this disconnect between, there may be a really AWP mature owner who wants to do a bid process, and you're getting responses from some contractors who may be very AWP mature, some who have never done AWP. Right, so we wanted to start getting this categorization so we could say on this project, excuse me, we're doing level 2 CII AWP, and then that has some definition behind it. And then we can build tools like the ROI tools or the project selection tools, or you could think, for example, contract language tools or data requirements tools that are framed within those levels of maturity. So by having defined those levels, that allows us to then build other tools that can meet people where they are. And so these are particularly valuable for folks that are less mature and are starting on that journey. So that was the intent of that categorization. That was a foundation behind this. That was a CII effort from a couple of years ago. That then we're continuing to build on that now. So, and the other note that I'll say is that even if you're not a CII member, you can participate in these because a number of these are joint working groups. So the one that I'm chairing now on engineering is a joint working group, which means that we can have industry SMEs that are outside of CII participate in that. And the one Andrew is chairing around scaffold and access management is also a joint working group. So there is some capacity to participate in that if you're a subject matter expert. Even if you're not a CII member, because there's a desire to make sure that we have all of the best information and knowledge contained in those committees. So with that, I think we can go to some questions.
Okay, I'm going to pick a really easy one to start, a slow ball. Are these tools available to anyone? Yes, as I mentioned, they'll be available for you today for free. They'll be, in fact, we're uploading them to the website tonight, I believe. And now I'm going to pick a harder one for Josh. What percentage of the TIC does technology cost on AWP implementation?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question to answer. O3 as a technology company uses a pricing model that has to do with TIC, so I could potentially answer that for O3, but that's not necessarily how all folks kind of approach the pricing question. But it's definitely not a linear process, right? As you get into larger projects, the percentage cost of training or software or anything is smaller. The relative cost on larger projects is greater, but the absolute cost is greater, but the relative cost is lower. So it's certainly not linear. The model that we used in the ROI tool is a curve that kind of looks like this, that sort of asymptotically levels off at larger TICs. It's not a linear approach. That was a curve that we did based off of some of our own knowledge of how we priced O3 plus some other software providers. But it's not an exact process, and that's why we added the user-definable concept. The idea was that you could take just 5 inputs and you could get an idea. You could say, hey, here's an idea. If I only know 5 things about this project, I can do a quick calculation, I can get some information, and then I can go in and as I, through this process of progressive elaboration, as I learn more information, I can get more detailed. I say, hey, you know what, this one's going to be a lower percentage of direct field labor. This one's going to I'm going to need more training because I'm operating in some country I've never operated in and they're not as familiar with AWP or whatever. You can tweak those. But the idea was make it super simple, put 5 things in, get an answer, and then you may look at that answer and you may say, I don't believe that. Well, okay, which part do you not believe? Okay, well then let me adjust that. Well, I don't believe that. And then now you're having a constructive conversation about how to get closer to the correct answer as opposed to just giving up and walking away. So, long answer to that, but it's, okay. If you want to talk about O3's pricing, I'd love to meet you over there.
Why didn't you choose Project 3? I was going to say his aftershave, but that's unfair. Again, it was the smallest, simplest. Now, for a pilot project, having a small $10 million project that's going to be run through pretty quickly might be a good idea. It might allow you to get those learnings, get that development, and then be able to expand it out to your portfolio. Everybody's tackling this at different speeds. Some people approach AWP as we're just going straight for Category D, full on, all of our projects tomorrow. And some people, I saw from Juan's comments earlier, don't jump all the way in straight away. Everybody's got different experiences. So everybody needs to understand what they're trying to get out of it and then tailor the pilot project or any sort of implementation to match what you're trying to get out of it and the timing of that.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind there is often within organizations, or if you think from an owner's perspective at least, you would have your sort of large cap group and then you have your small cap group. And so within your small cap group, your first small cap project is going to look different than your first large cap project by definition. So it was a little, sort of contrived here. Some of it was also to drive humor that may or may not have worked out. But so the selection, the number one, all right, I guess my answer wasn't good. The number one driver that we found in our experience is the project management team's commitment to change. Right? That's the number one thing. That if I had to pick only one criteria, it's the project manager or project management team's willingness to change. If it's being pushed down on somebody, right? Someone who's having something pushed onto them that doesn't want it is constantly looking for a way for that to fail so that they can be right? But versus someone who's saying, I recognize that this is something that's going to help me. I want to shine. I want the CEO to know my name because I had a very successful project. That's the person you want. You want the person who understands that a win for the AWP on this project is a win for that person, right? As opposed to someone who's looking for an excuse and be able to say, I told you so. So that project management team is the number one thing in my opinion.
Okay, technical question. Will the ROI tool be converted to a web page or something in the future? No. This thing actually resides behind the firewall within CII, so technically you have to be a CII member to get access to it. You guys are getting a sort of freebie version today, but if we converted it to a web page, it would be much more public facing. So the intent is that this is retained within CII to an extent. Upon completion of the ROI and selection tools and making cost-saving promises, how do you prevent being blamed for cost and schedule overruns? Wow. Okay, not pulling our punches with the cocktail time coming up. The best answer I can give you is be realistic. For example, I was rolling out AWP for a billion-dollar project, or billions-dollar, 3 projects, and our only expectation was on time and on budget. Because for mega projects, on time and on budget is a massive success, because most of them don't make it. We were using AWP as a risk mitigation strategy. Nobody started talking about 10% TIC savings. Nobody started talking about being 6 months early. We took the management team through it all. We explained how we were going to do it. We explained what we were going to do, but we also set the stage to say, this is the first time we're doing this. Don't expect miracles. And they just looked at it as, the answer we got back was, if you tell me today we can be on time and on budget, I'll bite your hand off. So set realistic expectations, don't overpromise. And that's why we built into this the maturity and the category. Because you're not going to get to that 10% CIC saving until you're very, very good at this and doing full AWP. If you pick the lower categories, you're going to get a much lower result, deliberately. Here's one for you. Can AWP be done without training or software?
Yeah, I mean, the technical answer to that is yes, you can do some version of AWP. You can't get to full maturity. You can't get to full scalability. I mean, the way that I think about it is, the Romans did amazing things with hand tools, right? You can technically build something with hand tools, but there's a reason why we use the cranes and things that we've invented, right? They make it easier and faster and more efficient. So yes, you can technically do things very manually, but if you want to optimize, you're going to need software, and you're going to need to know how to do that from a training perspective. So you need the know-how and the tools if you want to be optimal, but you can technically stumble through and execute, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Is engineering data availability a criteria within the selection tool? Yes, in the bottom section. And what it's looking at is, we talk about engineering in the top section as to whether you should do AWP or not. In the bottom section, it's talking about the type of AWP, that category A, B, C, D. So one of the things that's looking at is you cannot do full AWP properly if you don't have good engineering data and the data behind being able to support it, getting to that graphical work packaging. You can still do category B. You can do workplace planning with a stack of isometrics. It's not going to be as effective, but it's possible to do it. So yes, it's one of the things that we consider, but it's not an absolute go, no go. You can still do it. It's just going to reduce the value that you're going to get from it.
Yeah, we didn't go through that Andrew mentioned it briefly, but the other tool, the third tool, really the AWP benefits and what do we end up?
Maturity level benefits.
Maturity level benefits tool. Sorry, we went through several names before we really stuck the landing with that one. But that tool is much more detailed around what kind of investments you can expect from people, process, and technology at various levels of AWP maturity at various stages of the project. So that is a much more detailed tool that really allows you to understand where am I? Am I a category A, B, C, or D? And the details of what that means. We've rolled it up to a much higher level, but those tools are linked. So if you're looking at it and you want to understand where I am, you can sort of assess where I am and where I think we can go, and then you can input that into the other tools.
Can we make AWP implementation for residential or commercial buildings, not specifically industrial projects? With respect to the two tools that we just showed you, what I would say is, especially with that ROI tool, the savings, the benefits part of it, is derived from that RT319, which Bill O'Brien was showing us this morning at an introductory video. And one of the things he included in there was the chart showing these are the different industries that we looked at. You can use it, you can use AWP in other industries. The ROI tool is predicated on the research that was done by 319 to show the savings. So until we have data to show what those benefits are going to be in something like a residential or commercial, the ROI tool is necessarily not going to be accurate until we have the basis.
From a process perspective, the answer to that is yes. I mean, it's a methodology for planning. AWP is a methodology for a disciplined planning approach, and then a collection of activities into a discrete box that has a defined scope and a defined ownership team and a defined delivery time frame and deliverables and a defined tasks and activities that need to be executed against that. So that concept can be applied and has been applied outside of industrial and continues to grow. But the tools here specifically, as Andrew said, we're using some research that relied on mostly industrial projects.
Do you go with these tools before making any type of implementation or training in the company? So the ROI tool can be used as part of a business case. So for example, if your management team is questioning whether or not to do AWP, that kind of here's what we can expect to get out of it will always be part of the consideration. You will always be asked, what's this going to cost me and what am I going to get out of it? So that could definitely be part of that initial phase of justifying whether or not to do AWP. That being said, that does go lockstep with training, because typically people, if they don't know what AWP is and haven't been trained on it, they don't know what the questions are to ask anyway. So there's not necessarily a step-by-step sequential. I would always expect that you're going to want to get your people at least understanding what AWP is, so that when you take it to the management team, they're not looking at you like you've got something on your face, and because they don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, these tools were, and all the tools that we've been focused on within the performance and benchmarking side of our CI efforts were really about how do we lower the barriers to adoption of AWP. So we had a lot of conversations internally within CII about what are the things that are keeping AWP from being adopted. And one of those was, first off, this confusion about what does AWP mean, because if you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers. So we needed to categorize that so we could make it more understandable. And then it was, okay, well, what's the business case behind this? And so these tools are more commonly used by people earlier in their journey. Organizations that are on their 150th AWP implementation may not go through the rigor of doing a ROI calculation for the 151st, right? But if you're early in that process and you're still fighting that battle of convincing the management or whoever is necessary to the decision makers to sign off on the implementation of AWP, that is a driver behind this. CII wanted to say, hey, let's arm those folks out there, those champions out there, the evangelists within these companies that are fighting the battle to get AWP in place. Let's arm them with some tools. And so that was the intent behind this. So I think we know of lots of organizations that are using these, and O3 has its own ROI calculator that we also use with many of our clients. So we know from our experience it's effective in helping people communicate the business case to decision makers.
Who should complete the selection tool project manager AWP champion? As we said, one of the key characteristics of this is finding a team that's going to be willing to take this on. And that being said, people don't normally react very well when you're trying to shove something down their throat. So I would always recommend that these tools be done in a collaborative environment. Like I said, treat it like a framing session for a project. Get the project team together. The AWP champion can certainly sit in, but quite honestly, there was nothing of any complexity in that multiple choice set of questions that would require much detail around it. It's always beneficial to have the AWP champion available to answer questions, but it should be a project-led exercise. Because then at the end of the day, you want your project manager to be the one saying, we are doing this, not they made me. A couple of easy ones. Does the ROI tool cover a full portfolio or just a single project?
Yes, it's set up for a single project, so you can go through and iterate and run multiple projects through that. That's a potential expansion area for that initiative, but is not included in that ROI tool. There is some sharing of resources that's contemplated. So if you went through and you said, hey, I'm gonna run an iteration through the tool and think about 10 different projects as a portfolio. The reality is, on 10 small cap projects, you may not need an AWP data manager for each of those projects. You have one person who's doing that, for example. So you have some shared resources, and the tool does allow you to do that. You can put in, this is 1/10 of an FTE, or this is 25% of an FTE, so you can contemplate the concept of shared resources within that, but it's not automated around a portfolio. It's really geared towards a single specific project.
So there's a couple here that go hand in hand. What size of projects will the tool work for? And will the tool still work if direct labor is very small? So size of projects, we never found an issue on the top end. I think I tested it up to $100 billion, and if anyone's doing a project bigger than that, come and give me a shout anyway, please. On the lower end, it shows you where the cutoff point is. If you put in a project that's $50,000, you're probably going to get told that your return on investment is negative. So the whole benefit of something like this is exactly to be able to see where that lower end threshold is. Same with the other question about, can we do this on a project where labor is very small? Absolutely. If you're, like I said, if you heavily modularize, the best hour that you spend on site is the hour that you don't spend on site, right? So if you're heavily modularized, and instead of that 40%, you're only, say, 15, 20% of your TIC on site, what that's going to do is it's going to lower the benefit calculation, because the benefit is calculated on saving hours on site. So if you've already dropped those, then you'll be able to see where it makes sense or where it doesn't make sense for you. I mean, if everything you've done and it's a Meccano set and it's going to take you 1 week to install it all on site because you've prefabbed it completely, you're not probably going to want workface planners, or you're not going to need a great amount of software or training to put a few Meccano pieces in place. So it's definitely an option.
The thing to keep in mind, the tools are geared for folks that are earlier in the journey. So if you're an organization where AWP is the standard, then it now becomes more of an investment to deviate from that, right? So then continuing to do AWP on all projects, even very small ones, makes sense. But if you're talking about early on where it's not the standard and you're going to have to make investments and there's some upfront investment associated with that change hurdle, then there is a cutoff point where the ROI either becomes zero or goes negative. But once that's your standard, then there is no investment. That's how you do it, and it would require an investment to, in fact, deviate from that. So again, the tools are really geared for folks that are earlier, and it's not yet the corporate standard.
Good question, given the geographical where we are today. Can these tools be used outside Europe and North America? Absolutely. I'm sorry we weren't smart enough to be able to program in, select your symbol, so it does use dollars, but the mechanics of it will apply to whatever it is you have, so you can use it wherever. And like I said, within the ROI tool, everything is configurable. So if you disagree with our industry standard metrics, put your own in there, and you can configure it to your needs.
Certainly when you move around the globe, a number of things would change. One that comes to mind would be some of the costs of some of the resources. So there's those costs of the resources are come in default are North American, European type costs. So in other areas of the world, you would be using those user-definable fields more often. But again, all of those can be adjusted. The idea was give us 5 numbers and we give you an answer, and then you can, let me expand that, and I can start tweaking individual pieces as I start to understand that more.
And I think we've got time probably for one more. Would a linear or horizontal project be less suitable for pilot or full AWP implementation compared to a vertical one? It's kind of a bigger topic outside of just the 2 tools we presented. I mean, it all relies on the idea of what is AWP going to be of benefit to you. So again, like I said, I've seen this most often and I've applied it very well as just a risk mitigation strategy. You'd boil it down to its very, very simplest component, and it is we need engineering and procurement to give us stuff in the order that we need it for construction. Does that apply to linear as well? I would imagine so. I certainly think so. I can't imagine that you would want to start in 7 different places and work in 4 different directions. So absolutely it can apply, and the tools can support that as well.
Ed was speaking earlier, I don't know if Todd's here from Exxon, but talking about pipeline. And in that case, the construction is not that complicated per se, or the process may not be that complicated, but where the value was being found was in managing all of the constraints associated with it, like permitting and all the other interfaces that you have to do with third parties. By breaking it down into a smaller scope and then being able to say, let me figure out all the things associated with this scope, including the government and other people that I need to deal with, that has real benefit. So having that discrete scope with a defined set of all of the constraints and activities around that is really beneficial. So the simpler, the more complicated and the more that you need to coordinate between multiple interfaces, the more likely it is that the project will be unsuccessful, and that's AWP has a lot of value in managing that risk.
Okay, that being said, Lloyd is standing there, which is the equivalent of the red light flashing behind me, so I think we're going to call it a day. If anyone else has any other questions only about this any other time, we'll be there all day tomorrow as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thanks very much. And there is an open bar out there, and there are a lot of hot hors d'oeuvres, cold hors d'oeuvres, and great people to chat with. Take full advantage. We'll be keeping it open until 7 o'clock, so enjoy yourself, and please, if you have any suggestions or comments for me, please come up and talk to me. I love to hear what you have to say. David, I think you did an amazing job as day chair. And I did tell him not to get too physical, so he did restrain himself, but I got to tell you, John's doing this tomorrow, and he's even more aggressive than David, so just want you to be ready. Okay, go on out, have a good time, we'll see you soon.